Section 2.6, exponents and the order of operations. This is a very, very important section, in particular the order of operations. I see students in all of my classes make mistakes based on the order of operations, and I'm going to point out a couple of the common mistakes that I see. It's very, very important that you learn the order of operations and you learn it correctly. Lots and lots of mistakes at lots and lots of levels can be avoided by properly knowing the order of operations. Before we talk about the order of operations, we're going to talk about exponents. And I'm pretty sure you know what exponents are. If we have something like B stands for base to a power n, this stands for take the base and multiply it by itself n times. So there are n factors here. For example, if I give you 3 to the 4th, that means take 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which should be 81. Or if I tell you take 5 cubed, that would be 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. Now, on your calculator, there should be an exponentiation button. And depending on the type of calculator, it might work two different ways. On my calculator, I use a TI-84. I would do this. I would write 3, and then this little caret symbol, 4, and then hit enter. And that would work. On other calculators, you do this. You have 5, and then there's a button that looks like this, X, Y, and then you hit the 3. So you should take a look at your calculator and see how it works. If you have questions, let me know, and I'll try to help you through that. But there should be an exponentiation button somewhere on your calculator. Okay, now let's talk about the order of operations. The order of operations is the agreed upon order of performing arithmetic operations when there's more than one. Why is this the right order? I don't know. It's just that at some point, some people sat down and agreed that this is the way we were going to do things. It's not my choice. It's not your choice either. This is the way we're going to do it, and it's the only way we're going to do it. Okay, so the order of operations is, number 1, the first thing you'd always do is anything inside parentheses, inside brackets. And I like to use brackets because I can't spell parentheses, so I use brackets. And that's partially true. I can't spell very well. But the other part is, there's inside parentheses really isn't a good description because there's more than just parentheses that we use for brackets. Brackets could be parentheses. They could be square brackets. They could be square curly brackets. They could be a big division bar. And they could even be a square root symbol. So those are all different kinds of brackets that we use. That's why I don't really like to use the word parentheses. The second thing you do, after you've done everything you can inside the brackets, you look for exponents. So the second thing comes exponents. After you've done your exponents, you do multiply, divide. And here's where students make mistakes right here. Multiply and divide. People are used to things like, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And I don't care for that very much because what people think is that multiply comes before divide. And that's not true. When you have multiply and divide, you go left to right. And I'll do an example here in a minute to show you that it does make a difference. And finally, 4, add, subtract. And again, people mess this one up. Add does not come first. You go left to right. So let me give you some examples here. Let's say I have 8 divided by 2 times 4 as compared to 8 times 2 divided by 4. Notice that we have division and we have multiply. If you're doing it correctly, you go left to right. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. This one, on the other hand, you would do multiply first. You would do 8 times 2. 8 times 2 is 16. Then divide by 4, and that will give you an answer of 4. Now let's compare this to this one. 8 divided by 2 times 4. If I wanted to do that multiply first, I would have to specifically put it inside parentheses like that. And that forces me to do the multiply first. This one becomes 8 divided by 8, which is 1. So you can see it makes a big difference. If I do the divide first in this problem, I get 16. If I do the multiply first, I get 1. So we have to agree on how we're going to do it. And the agreed upon rule, the correct rule, is multiply and divide are equals. You do them left to right. Okay? So you might forget about that please excuse my dear Aunt Sally thing that you learned somewhere probably. Or if you're going to remember it correctly. Remember that multiply doesn't come before divide, and add doesn't come before subtract. All right, let's just look at a couple problems here. How about, I'm just going to steal some problems out of the book. 15 divided by 3 minus parenthesis 2 minus 7 times 2. All right, so if I'm doing this one, I look and see what I have. The first thing I see is I have some parentheses. So I should do inside my parentheses first. So this is going to be 15 divided by 3 minus. Inside my parentheses, 2 minus 7 is negative 5. And that parenthesis, the only thing it has inside of it is a 2. I can't do anything with a 2. There's nothing to simplify inside those parentheses, so I just write it down as a 2. All right, next I see I have division, I have subtraction, and I have multiply. What comes first? The division, because the division is on the left. So that's going to be 5 minus negative 5 times 2. Now I see I have subtraction right here, and I have multiply right there. Multiply. So that's 5 minus negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. Almost done. I do my subtraction now. 5 minus negative 10, that's the same as 5 plus 10. 5 plus 10 is 15. There's my answer, 15. Let's see, how about one with some powers on it here? How about 9 minus 7 squared times negative 3 minus 2 to the 4th. Once again, I see I have parentheses. This time I have some powers. I start inside my parentheses. Here I have 9 minus 7, so that's 2 squared times negative 3. There's nothing inside those parentheses to be done, so I leave them alone. Minus 2 to the 4th. Now I have powers, and I see I have a couple powers, so I'm just going to do them at the same time. I have 2 squared, that's going to be 4, so that's going to be 4 times negative 3 minus 2 to the 4th. Let's say 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. 2 to the 4th is 16. Almost done now. 4 times negative 3, the multiply comes next. That's negative 12 minus 16. Negative 12 minus 16 is negative 28. All right, the last thing you're going to see in this section is evaluating expressions. And we've done that before. Evaluating expressions just means plugging numbers in. So for example, I might say evaluate a squared minus c squared for a equals negative 3, c equals 4. Now, here's a strong suggestion for you. This will help avoid errors, especially errors involving pluses and minuses. Whenever you evaluate, whenever you plug in a variable, wherever that variable is and the number you're plugging in, use parentheses. It will help avoid mistakes with minus signs. So, I see I'm supposed to take the number negative 3 and plug it in for a. So I'm going to write negative 3 squared. I plugged in for a, I plugged in a negative 3, I put it in parentheses. Minus, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I plug in 4 squared, plug it in like so. Negative 3 squared, negative 3 times negative 3, that's 9. Minus 4 times 4 is 16. 9 minus 16 is negative 7. Okay, so that's what evaluating is going to look like. My suggestion, once again, anytime you plug a number in for a letter, use parentheses. The very last thing you're going to see are some common mistakes. So I want to talk about some of those. And the common mistakes a lot of times come when people use their calculator. And they'll do something like this. They'll have something like minus 4 squared. And they'll type that into their calculator. They'll type in the little minus sign, the 4, the caret, the 2, and the calculator will tell them the answer is minus 16. So this is what we typed into our calculator. And the students will come to me and they'll say, my calculator's not working right because when I take minus 4 times minus 4, I should get a positive 16. And you're absolutely right. When you take minus 4 times minus 4, you should get positive 16, but that's not what the calculator is doing because that's not what you told it to do. All right, so you got to be very careful here. If I give you this minus 4 squared, what comes first? Does minus sign come first or does squaring come first? Well, in the order of operations, squaring comes first. So what this means and what the calculator is doing is you take 4 squared and then you do the minus sign. Those two symbols really mean exactly the same thing because that's the order of operations and your calculator follows the order of operations very specifically. If you want the calculator to do minus 4 times minus 4, then you need to write it this way. You actually need to use the parentheses buttons on your calculators. That one now means minus 4 times minus 4, and that is 16. So watch out for that. The other real common mistake I'll see people do with their calculator, if you have 2 plus 3 over 4 minus 1, I'll see people type this into the calculator as 2 plus 3 divided by 4 minus 1. And again, if I'm the calculator here, I'm going to follow the order of operations very, very specifically. The order of operations says I do divide before I do add or subtract. So the calculator is going to do this divide first. It's going to take 3 divided by 4. That's really not what you want. Okay, using your calculator once again here to do this correctly, you really need parentheses. And that's how this big division bar here is considered a bracket. It's considered a bracket because it tells you do everything on top first, do everything on bottom second, and then divide at the end. Okay? So be careful with your calculator. Calculator is a great tool, but it's only as good as what you put into it. And if you put in the wrong thing, it's going to give you the wrong answer.